Well, good day, everyone. Welcome to today's Conversations on Leadership. I'm Dr. Gilles LaMarche, your host for this event. As I start every podcast, I love to pick a quote that I believe exemplifies the person that I'm about to interview. This quote is from John F. Kennedy. It says, "Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other." And when you meet my guest today, I believe you're going to agree that quote really does fit this gentleman. His name is Dr. Grant Rivera. Let me read some of his bio. It's way too long. We'd spend the entire podcast just reading his bio. But Grant is committed to serving every child and supporting every family. Pretty important. He believes great schools and communities are built on the combined strength of talented educators and an engaged community. Currently serves as the superintendent of Marietta City Schools here in Marietta, Georgia. 13th superintendent since 1892. He leads the district's 12 schools, approximately 8,900 students, 1,400 employees. Grant received his bachelor's degree in education and social policy from Northwestern University, a master's degree in special education from the University of Alabama. He also holds a doctorate of education from the University of Alabama with an emphasis in school law, and is a Pajero Fellow of the Pajero Institute, a national nonprofit organization that's reimagining public education. And I've had the opportunity to meet Grant on a couple of occasions here in Marietta, and I've always been impressed, not only about how he shows up when you meet him, but how he shows up from a stage, how his authenticity as a leader really comes through in the messages that he shares. And I believe that's what you're going to get to see and hear today. So Dr. Grant Rivera, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm honored. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be included. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure. So my first question for you today is, it's very obvious to me in the few interactions we've had that you are what I call a servant leader. So when did you first know that you wanted your livelihood to revolve around servant leaderships or a desire to serve others?
It's interesting. My education journey started really as a young child in my home when I watched an older brother of mine who has severe learning disabilities really struggle through public K-12 education. And I kept asking myself as I watched my brother as a young child, is this what school's supposed to look and feel like? And then when he would graduate, I would see him jump from job to job because he functioned just high enough not to receive a lot of support, government assistance, but he functioned low enough really not to be able to keep a job. And just as a very impressionable young man in my formative years, I really felt this strong urge to what's my moral and social responsibility to keep other families from experiencing what our family felt as I watched my older brother literally fall through the cracks of society. So I think in my mind, my intrigue around serving others, and to your point about servant leadership, really started from watching the experiences of my home. And I think the moral and social obligation that I took from that as a young child and now as an adult today is, what's my responsibility to address that? And what's my opportunity through servant leadership and otherwise to make a difference for the next family? And I think that experience I hold dear in every single interaction I have now, whether it's a child with disabilities or not, a child at poverty or not, a child that is excelling or not. I think that's really what I carry with me. And I think, what would that family expect from me now that my family didn't get many years ago?
Wow. From a block of sorts to a great opportunity to discover who you have become and how you choose to serve your community. I love the fact that you talk about moral and social responsibility. And I see that as a necessary quality, if you like, in a servant leader, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's very easy for us as leaders, you and me in our respective educational roles, to settle in and acclimate to those who have experiences that are like ours. And I think the moral and social responsibility, particularly as you frame this around a social justice conversation, is how do you address the inequities that exist, and what does social justice look like from a leadership standpoint? And I think in education, especially in public education, we we wrap our arms around every child that walks in our front doors. This isn't a private school, where you could keep some at home and only send the best and brightest. And I think our responsibility around servant leadership, around social justice, is how do we address those inequities that exist? Because we're setting the trajectory of a lifetime for a child. You show me a child who can't read by third grade, and I'll show you a school to prison pipeline where that correlation is tight. And I think that's this opportunity we have as leaders to change that trajectory, to get others outside of a comfort zone so we can identify, support, and ultimately empower those that could be like us but could be very, very different from us.
Well, I want to thank you for actually choosing that pathway, because you are definitely making a difference as an exceptional leader in our community. So I thank you for that. Most times when I chat with leaders, they're able to relate to someone somewhere that actually provided them the support. So you got the message from your brother's experiences, and then somewhere along the way, you made a conscious choice that you were going to choose a particular direction. Are there any people along the way that actually sort of gave you that hand up, or that mentored you, or that provided inspiration, whatever type of support it might have been? And who were these people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think for me, it's very person and name specific. And it's interesting. I think in leadership, regardless of our sector, I sit in a seat today with you that's a public K-12, as a public K-12 superintendent. But leadership can be lonely, because as we move up or down the rungs of the ladder, we become the number of peers that we have who can identify and understand our day-to-day becomes smaller and smaller. It's the true definition of leadership, right? So one of the things that I was very hungry for when I was a school principal, and still am hungry for as a school superintendent, is finding other people who have walked a mile in my same shoes. So therefore, they can ask the tough questions that prompt me to reflect and grow and learn. And I think that oftentimes when you're in a room as a leader, I mean, they say all the time, right? Like, if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yes.
I also will say, though, that just the mere dynamics around leadership, there are times when you don't have people push you in the same way, especially when they haven't been in your seat. And I think for me, there's a gentleman by the name of Phil Lanou. He was my assistant superintendent when I was a high school principal in Cobb County. He would go on to become the superintendent in Athens up in Clark County, Georgia. And he would also be recognized as the National Superintendent of the Year. Incredible man. But he was someone who understood my experiences in a lonely, admittedly, leadership role. But at the same exact time, he understood it, but he was also willing to make me feel very uncomfortable, because he knew the tough questions to ask that maybe at times I was too busy or not reflective enough to ask myself. So for me, the powerful person who sometimes pushed me and sometimes pulled me was really someone who had walked a mile in the same shoes. And I am a different person today because I have someone who could relate to that. I think for everyone who's listening to this, I think the reflective question is, how do you find others who paved the path before you, not only to challenge you, but to identify with your experiences? Because it can be, listen, my sweet wife, when I walk in the door at night, will say, "How was your day?" And I could spend an hour telling her about my day, and she's never going to understand it. Right. But those people who have been in a similar situated leadership role understand it differently than anybody else. And I think finding those people in your network, and you clearly have that as well through your incredible networks and friendships that you have, but I think we as leaders need that to grow and reflect and also to feel supported.
So what advice could you give to a young or a seasoned leader who's actually looking for mentorship? Any advice on that point?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I think that, first of all, I think be a student of the game. And I think one of the things I do is I will study, from social media posts to writings. I will study board agenda items. I will study everything I can on people that I respect in the industry that have similar roles to mine. I'm a student of the game. And that's something that I think every leader be it young or veteran, should do. I also think I'd say this to younger leaders. When I think in my career, there have only been a select few number of people who've reached out to me and said, hey, like, I don't know you, and could we connect? Could we partner? And I think that I would encourage young leaders to find those exemplars and role models, and don't be too intimidated, all because you don't have a relationship yet. It's only because you haven't asked. And I think that, in my experience, a lot of people might be interested in developing a friendship, or a relationship, a mentorship, but even fewer people are acting upon that. So, it's one thing for me to study a superintendent from afar. It's another thing for me to reach out and say, could we develop even a distant relationship? So I think, don't be afraid to reach out and take advantage of those opportunities, because those are powerful leadership moments. Those are powerful growth moments.
That is actually fantastic advice, because one of my mentors early on used to say, you've got to ASK to GET. Right? If you're looking for mentorship and you're not willing to ask to be mentored, so you gave a perfect example of what that could look like, but it takes an action step.
Yeah. And what I think is interesting too is that, and I guess I need to also say, there are leaders in every sector. And even though I'm in a public K-12 sector, I will tell you that I had the privilege of sitting down with the former CEO of Wellstar, which is a large hospital network here in Georgia, specifically based out of Marietta. And he and I weren't talking academics, and we weren't talking school lunches and school buses and standardized tests. We just started talking leadership. And over breakfast with this gentleman, Mr. Brown, he was teaching me about how I could be a better husband to my wife and how to start to compartmentalize some things. So the reality is these types of role models and mentors exist everywhere. It's just our intentionality to ASK, as you said, in order to GET.
Yeah, it's a big deal, right? So changing lines a little bit on our questioning here, how do you, as the superintendent of Marietta City Schools, and I'm reminded, 12 schools, 8,900 students, 1,400 employees, how do you lead your team to be focused on the mission? Yeah. There's got to be a strategy of some sort that you utilize. Could you share with us your strategy of keeping your team and your teams, I would say, 12 schools, focused on the mission?
Yeah, I think one of the most important aspects, and I learned this many years ago from a leadership expert, he said, you've got to unite in a common vision. And I will ask our team often, all right, listen, if we're talking about a value statement, if we're talking about some type of operational rollout, in Marietta, in our little small community, the hub is the local Kroger. If I walk into Kroger tonight to get a loaf of bread, I guarantee you I can have 10 conversations from the front door to the bread aisle, or from families that we serve, or staff that I serve. And I always say to our team, the effectiveness of whether or not we've united our community and our staff in a common vision can happen in Kroger. If I walk in the front door and I ask those 10 people, hey, what's the vision? What are the beliefs in Marietta around all children and literacy? Or what are the beliefs? Right now we're in a dynamic where we're involved in school closures due to COVID-19. And one of our beliefs and our value statements is around making sure that every child is fed every day. They're not going hungry on our watch, even though our school is closed. So one of our value statements that I should be able to find out when I walk into Kroger tonight, if I ask 10 different people, can they tell us, maybe not to the word, but can they articulate the same value and vision that we are trying to share among our staff? And really, it's one thing a bunch of employees who get a paycheck tell you, how we unite in a common vision. It's an entirely another thing to bump into a bunch of people at Kroger and say, hey, what is the vision of Marietta City Schools? What are the values of Marietta City Schools? And I think our success depends on the degree to which our larger community can articulate that shared common vision. And I think far too often you ask 10 different people, you get 10 different answers. And I don't feel necessarily that is a common vision that is leading our community.
That's a lot of great information, because really when people can surround around a common vision and a common mission, great things can happen. And I know you're doing a good job doing that so far. So talking about team members, employees, teachers, how do you help a new employee, somebody coming into Marietta City Schools as a first timer? How do you help them understand the culture of your organization that you so eloquently spoke about earlier?
Yeah. I think that happens formally, and I think it happens very informally. I can say this as a superintendent with, just under 1,400 staff members. One of the things that I prioritize each and every day is I will get in front of every single new employee in small groups, albeit, to welcome them to our school district. And I talk to them about, listen, we're not a school district of 15,000 people serving 100,000 kids. We are much smaller. And the idea that there is accountability and there is support directly from you, who's making the greatest impact at a classroom or in a school bus or in a lunch cafeteria line, all the way to me, who is superintendent, I want them to know, and I do that intentionally by welcoming every new group of employees when they come to our school district. And that's just an opportunity for me to really stress the value of family and connectedness in our district. And I think that carries itself over into the different touch points that not only I will have, but what I encourage our leaders to do, how we onboard our staff and how we make them feel as if they're not just an employee with a number, but they are a member of the family making a difference, is critically important. And I think we pride ourselves in Marietta on being special, different, and better. And we really leverage our size as an organization and our family, our sense of family and values, to really reinforce that to every new person that comes on board.
Well, you certainly have been a fantastic example in the community of what community leadership really does look like. And like I said, when I was introducing you, anytime I've interacted with you, it has been good. It's been great, actually. And anytime I've ever mentioned the word Dr. Grant Rivera to anyone, they always have such positive comments. The kindest, the smart guy, engaged, committed, resourceful. I mean, all these beautiful adjectives that describe you. So for our viewers today on this particular podcast, any closing comments, Dr. Rivera?
Well, I would say this. I think I'm humbled and honored to join you. I appreciate you doing this for all the listeners and everyone who's certainly so committed to your vision, and also those who have an interest in leadership. I just would say, like, in the moments that you could steal with all of your guests, certainly I'm humbled to be a very small part on that special list. I think these are great leadership opportunities, and I commit that I am a student of you and your podcast and your leadership interviews as much as anybody else listening. So thank you for the difference that you're making. And I'll say to one very hungry leader who's doing the very best he knows how, thank you for inspiring me to do that better. And I appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Rivera. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on today's Conversations on Leadership. Wishing you a fantastic week, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.